Hello again, fellow infidels. Tonight I'm going to be doing a response video to Inward Burn and his video talking about why millennials are leaving the church. I have to say, as far as dealing with a believer's arguments, this one isn't that bad. A lot of the things he says, while I don't necessarily hold to them as an actual belief, they're at least more reasonable than the kinds of positions put forward by some of the Calvinists on YouTube. But there's still a few points in his video that I would like to address. So let's get right to it, shall we?
Think about people who follow Jesus. It does have the word anti this, anti that, and that's kind of what believers or Christians are thought of.
The reason they're thought of that way is because just take a look at the church. That's what they are. The people that typically follow Christian teachings are the ones that are out there trying to get rid of gay rights, are the ones that are trying to get rid of women's rights. So the reason the church seems so negative, so anti-everything, is simply because it is.
These atheists, and some atheists will say, you know, atheism is just a lack of belief in God, or we don't, based on the evidence, we don't believe there is a God. But the functional atheism that I see on YouTube and in a lot of places is much more than just that.
This is straw man number one. You know the definition of atheism. You just demonstrated that you know the definition of atheism, and yet, as we will see, you continue to misrepresent the atheist position. Now, whether this is a conscious decision on your part or not, I don't know. But I'm going to point out any time that I see in the video where you do misrepresent the atheist position on the existence or non-existence of God. It very simply is a lack of belief in God. Now, some of us do go a step further and say that due to the lack of evidence, there is no reason to believe in God. And since there is no reason to believe in God, just as there is no reason to believe in leprechauns, we do not believe that there is at least your God, Yahweh.
And here comes these atheists who are targeting them.
So y'all need to hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they raping everybody out here.
And they come to these Christians or people that have left the church and they say, you know, all evidence points to the fact that there is no God. All evidence points to the fact that Jesus Christ didn't rise from the dead. All evidence points to the fact that Christianity is nothing but hate and it's anti this and anti that.
Wrong. This is the second misrepresentation of the atheist position. Again, we don't say that the evidence says there is no God, or the evidence says there was no resurrection. Instead, we say there is no evidence for God. There is no evidence for the resurrection. There is a difference. And as for you saying that we say that the church is nothing but hate, I'm going to replay that clip from Hemant and listen closely to what it is he says.
We all know what the church is against, and we really don't care what the church is for when you have that much baggage.
He says we don't care what the church is for because it is against so many things. That's not saying that the church is nothing but hate and anti-this, anti-that. It's saying with that much negativity, why care about the positive?
And they welcome these people with these young people with open arms and draw them in with this kind of sense of love and belonging and acceptance. And if you go on YouTube and you say you're an atheist, you're going to get a lot of thumbs up and a lot of recognition, a lot of, welcome to the club, good job, you're using your head, reason. And frankly, it's sad.
Sad? Is it any more sad than the parties that are thrown for baptisms, for first communions? Is it sad at the end of a church service when all of the members of the congregation meet up afterwards and give each other big hugs and welcome each other and say how much they missed seeing each other since last week and talk over coffee and donuts? Is it sad when members of churches are happy to see each other when they go to their Bible studies or their mission trips or whatever it is they do? Is it sad for those people to welcome people that are like-minded? If you don't think it's sad for them to be welcoming of like-minded individuals, then you have a heck of a double standard when it comes to the way atheists are supposed to act amongst themselves.
Do I have to be a Christian to be a believer in Jesus Christ? And when I say Christian, I mean, do I have to put on the label of Christian because I believe in the resurrection of Christ?
This is really an introduction to the idea behind the rest of your video. And I'm not going to cover the whole video because it was 15 minutes long, and I would like to keep this nice and concise because my problem is not with the majority of your video, but rather a few smaller parts in it. But I will say that when it comes to the majority of your video talking about how the label of Christian isn't necessary to accept the resurrection of Christ and accept salvation, you don't talk much about whether or not the events you believe in are true. Instead, you talk about marketing techniques, basically is what it boils down to. You're talking about ways to convince believers to stay believers without having to be a part of the church so you don't lose them to atheism. When your arguments end up boiling down to marketing rather than provable facts, I think that should say something.
Atheism, believing that there's no God. And that is
misrepresentation number 3.
Jesus Christ is not Christianity. That is not the same thing. He is a person who did something marvelous, that we all are a beneficiary of his death and resurrection, and people need to hear the good news.
Okay, we've heard the good news. Prove it. That's all we're asking for. All we want is the truth. We just want provable facts. We want a reason to believe in whatever it is we're believing. Now, perhaps it's because you genuinely misunderstand what atheism is, because you seem to keep saying that it is a belief that there is no God. But atheists, for the most part, take great pride in being able to say that we live within the confines of reality. Now, if you can verify that the things you're talking about happened in reality, then we would have no choice but to accept that they did in fact happen. We're waiting.
He talks about atheists trying to get atheists to come out of the closet and to confess they're atheists. And I think you might be surprised, especially on YouTube, how many believers in the resurrection of Christ there are that need to come out of the closet. I honestly believe that there are people who believe in the resurrection of Christ that are calling themselves atheists because they're so fed up with religion, they're so fed up with conservative Christianity, they're so fed up with feeling like, if I'm a Christian, I gotta hate homosexuals, I gotta act a certain way, I gotta do a certain thing, and these rules and laws, and so I might as well just believe that there's no, or say that I believe there's no God. I might as well just say that I believe that Christ didn't rise from the dead. I might as well go someplace where I feel like I'm loved, I feel like I'm accepted, and they go to this atheist community, and even though I think deep down they believe in the resurrection of Christ, but they're going to call themselves an atheist. And I can testify that I am one of those people. I did that. It was only for about a week, but I did that, and for exactly those same reasons I just told you.
What you're describing isn't atheism. See, if you believe that Jesus was the Son of God and that he resurrected, came back from the dead, then by definition, that's not atheism that you're talking about. You're still a theist. You just don't want to call yourself Christian. So the people that you're talking about, and I'm sure there's some out there, but by and large, that's not what we are. I can only speak definitively for myself, but I think you're overestimating the number of people out there that would fall into this category. As for your experience as an atheist for a week, while still believing in Jesus and the resurrection and all that kind of stuff, since that wasn't actual atheism, you're basically saying the equivalent of, I want to try Mexican food and eat nothing but Mexican food, and then you spend the next week eating Taco Bell. You're not eating real Mexican food. You're not actually holding the atheist position. You can't force yourself to be an atheist. I've said it before, and I'll probably end up saying it again and again and again. Atheism is not a choice. Belief is not a choice. Either something makes sense to you, or it does not. The resurrection of Jesus does not make sense to me. Belief in God does not make sense to me. Therefore, I am an atheist. Now, since during that week, the resurrection of Jesus still made sense to you, the existence of God still made sense to you, you were not an atheist during that week. So, sorry to say it, but that argument is invalid.
And if somebody could just say, you know what, I'm not going to call myself a Christian, I'm not going to try to change myself, but I do believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and I believe that it's a fact. And that is not a religion, that is just acknowledging something that's true.
It's only acknowledging something that's true if it is in fact true. With a lack of evidence, it is not unreasonable to not believe those things.
You might be surprised that the Apostle Paul, the word Christian, it's not recorded one time in the Bible that the word Christian ever passed through his lips. Not one time.
I understand why you're bringing this up. You're basically saying that it wasn't supposed to be a separate religion, it was just supposed to be belief in a historical event that actually happened and all that kind of stuff. But you're bringing up the fact that there are words that are not found, at least very prominently, within the Bible. It brought me on to a different point, a bit of a side note here. If the Bible is the inspired word of a perfect all-knowing being, there's a bunch of words that, if I were an all-knowing being and I really loved the people that I was talking to, I would probably have included. And not only that, I probably would have given them the mental capacity to understand what I was saying. Words like antibiotics, biology, cancer, DNA, electricity, flagella, geology, half-life, isotope, Jurassic, kinetic, leukemia, malaria, nucleus, ovaries, pancreas, quarantine, RNA, science, trigonometry, ultraviolet, vaccine, World Wide Web, X-rays, yttrium, and zoology.
I do not believe in universalism. I do believe that if you absolutely hate God, if you absolutely don't want God, if you're upset with His grace, kind of like the good son and the prodigal son story, God may give you that option.
This is another misrepresentation. We don't necessarily hate God. We just don't believe He exists. Now, if He did exist, that's another story altogether, because it's pretty hard to deny that the actions taken by Yahweh, particularly in the Old Testament, they're pretty gruesome, and we're a human to act that way. I would have no other choice but to stand against that person.
Author Brennan Manning said the biggest cause of atheism in the world is Christians who are hypocrites.
Incorrect. The biggest cause of atheism is a lack of belief. The biggest cause of millennials leaving the church is hypocritical Christians.
We need to stop being hypocrites, but I think the problem is we can't, because Jesus gave too many commandments, and
That was very cleverly worded. You kind of danced around what I think you mentally registered that you were actually saying. And what you were saying was that there are contradictions in the Bible. Jesus gave too many commandments. Well, if He were the Son of God, and more than that, God Himself in human form, and was therefore all perfect, none of those commandments, if followed to the letter, would lead to someone being hypocritical. That's just not something a perfect being would do. So, if Jesus existed, pretty sure the fact that He gave too many commandments for His followers to not be hypocrites if they followed Him to the letter, pretty sure that's evidence that He wasn't who people say He is.
and these atheists are coming, to tempt believers during this time of struggle and faith to believe that the way to find peace is that there's no God.
Misrepresentation.
So I guess I'm asking you, what is more important, your stand against homosexuality, or people falling and believing that there's no God or no resurrection?
Misrepresentation.
And I do believe homosexuality is a sin. I do believe it's a sin.
That's a topic for another time, but believe me, we will be talking about that one.
And I'll tell you, some of their arguments are so one-sided, unchallenged.
A lot of our arguments are one-sided and unchallenged. Really. See, because there's a lot of people on YouTube on the other side of the argument who are worse, I would say. On the atheist side of things, you won't find too many of us that don't allow comments on our videos, don't allow video responses. It happens every once in a while, but very rarely. Whereas when it comes to Christian videos, a good chunk of them censor the comments, freely admit to doing so. They don't allow differing opinions on their channels. So, while you don't necessarily fall into that category, I think it's a little inaccurate to say that atheist positions go unchallenged.
I think there's a lot of debate within the academic world about the creation and God.
No. There is no debate in the academic world about creation, because they typically don't use the word creation. See, creation implies a creator. There isn't a single scientific discipline where there's even one equation where you need to factor God in to determine all of the variables. The equations work whether or not God is there, which indicates that the bit of the natural world that branch of science is studying acts exactly the same whether or not God is there. So, when you say that there is debate in the academic world about God and creation, there isn't. We know Genesis is a fantasy. No reputable scientist considers that open for debate anymore.
And also, atheists are making claim that God is evil. The God of the Old Testament is evil. And they're saying all these things, which it's very persuasive. If you don't have a strong foundation on the love of God and the finished work of Christ and your identity in Christ, they're carrying these people away.
I notice here you don't actually make an argument against the position that God is evil. Instead, you lament the loss of the flock. So I pose a direct question to you. If the God of the Bible were in fact real, how could you possibly say that a good chunk of his actions throughout the Old and even the New Testament are not evil?
My thoughts are on those believers who are struggling in their faith that these atheists are preying on and, deceiving.
Preying on. Suddenly sharing a viewpoint is preying on them. What about childhood indoctrination? What about enforcing infant baptisms before the child is even capable of understanding what's going on around him? What about raising kids to believe that if they question the dogmas of their religion, they will burn in hell for all of eternity? And not only that, but the God that's going to send them there is doing so justly. Is that not preying upon these children? It would be one thing if you were lecturing Christians on doing all of these things and saying that they are also preying on people who are defenseless, who are weak against the arguments being presented to them. Perhaps you plan on doing that. I don't know. But for you to categorize atheists as people who are preying on people who are having questions in their faith, it doesn't fly. We're not preying on them. We're presenting them with an option. Sharing a viewpoint is not preying on them. We aren't forcing them to come to our side. We aren't forcing them to not believe in something. Or we aren't even forcing them to accept that there is no evidence for something. We will continue to say there is no evidence. We will continue to say that there's no reason to believe in God, because as far as we are concerned, as far as we can tell, this is the way the world works. And quite frankly, we're tired of the religious running everything. But we're not forcing anybody. We're not trying to forcefully deconvert people. We're presenting our opinions. As are you. Are you preying on them as well? Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea from this video. From our interaction on the Throne of Reason, I enjoyed talking with you. You were much more reasonable than some of the other people that I've been interacting with as of late. Again, just sharing my perspective. I figured I should probably get this recorded and uploaded before YouTube gets rid of the video response option. Until next time, keep thinking critically.